The sun was setting over the Los Angeles skyline when Leonard walked through the glass doors of the imposing building that housed his advertising agency. His footsteps echoed through the empty lobby as he headed toward the private elevator. It is he. Was just another day where he'd be the last one to leave. Not that it bothered him. In fact, it was exactly how he had planned his routine since the divorce. The presidential office occupied the entire top floor. The glass walls offered a panoramic view of the city now lighting up, thousands of points of light resembling earthly stars. Leonard poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat in his Italian leather chair, his eyes fixed on the financial reports on his desk. Under his leadership, Carter & Associates had become one of the largest advertising agencies in the country. Every calculated decision, every strategic move had taken him to the top. The price? Only his 15-year marriage, his relationship with his daughter Lily, and any remnants of a personal life he once had. A price he had considered fair until now. His fingers drummed on the mahogany desk as he analyzed the latest quarterly numbers. Revenue had doubled compared to the previous year. He should have been satisfied, celebrating, but something nagged at him, an uneasy feeling he couldn't. His phone buzzed, displaying a message from his ex-wife. "Lily asked about you today. Again." Leonard ignored it, as he had for months. His 16-year-old daughter had chosen to live with her mother after the divorce, and he had buried himself even deeper in work to avoid confronting the void it left behind. When he finally decided to head home, it was past midnight. His mansion in Beverly Hills, with its 10,000 square feet, Olympic-sized pool and immaculate garden, was a monument to his loneliness. The staff had already left, leaving only a prepared dinner in the microwave, another meal he wouldn't touch. He climbed the stairs toward his bedroom, passing through the hallway decorated with family photos he couldn't bring himself to remove. His gaze lingered on one in particular, a younger version of himself smiling as he held 5-year-old Lily on his shoulders. He couldn't remember the last time he had smiled like that. The night passed like all the others. Late-night work, a few sips of whiskey, and restless sleep haunted by dreams he forced himself to forget by morning. But on this particular morning, something would be different. Leonard woke with a throbbing headache, the result of a sleepless night and alcohol. Breakfast was already set on the kitchen table, untouched as usual. He grabbed only a cup of strong coffee and headed to the garage where his Porsche Cayenne awaited. The day was unusually warm for a spring morning. The car's air conditioning worked at full blast as he drove across the city toward the office. Then, on a whim, he took a route, something he rarely did. His therapist, whom he saw more out of obligation than desire, had always said he needed to break his routines. Sunset Bridge wasn't his usual path. In fact, he couldn't remember the last time he'd crossed it. Traffic was surprisingly light for that hour, and then something caught his eye. A small figure, almost imperceptible, leaning against one of the lampposts. At first, he thought of ignoring it. It wasn't in his nature to get involved with whatever was happening on the street. But something about that silhouette disturbed him deeply. He slowed down and his heart nearly stopped when he could make out the scene. It was a child, a girl no older than 6, tied to the post. Leonard slammed on the brakes, parking haphazardly on the shoulder. His hands shook as he opened the door. Just a few feet away, the girl remained motionless, wearing a faded pink dress that, for some reason, looked terribly familiar. He approached cautiously, his heart pounding harder with each step. The girl didn't move, not even when he got close. Her eyes were fixed on a distant point as if she were somewhere else, in another world. Then Leonard noticed the marks on her arms, the bruises barely hidden by the dirt on her skin. "My God," he murmured, his hands trembling as he searched his pockets for something to cut the ropes. He found a pocket knife on his keychain and began working on the bindings, careful not to hurt the already battered child. With each passing second, a strange sensation grew in his chest. It wasn't just the shocking situation that unsettled him. It was something deeper, as if the scene had unearthed long-buried memories. The pink dress, so similar to what Lily used to wear at that age, made his stomach churn. When he finally freed the girl, she remained still, like a small statue. Leonard didn't know what to do. His first instinct was to call the police, but something stopped him. Instead, with a gentleness he didn't know he possessed, he picked her up and carried her to his car. During the entire drive to the nearest hospital, he couldn't stop glancing in the rearview mirror, watching the small figure sitting silently in the back seat, her gaze still lost. Something about the situation stirred him in a way he couldn't explain, as if fate had orchestrated this meeting. What Leonard didn't know as he drove toward the hospital was that this seemingly random moment on a spring morning would become the catalyst for a profound change in his life. A change that would force him to confront not only his lonely present, but also the ghosts of his past he had worked so hard to keep buried. St. Mary's Hospital was bustling when Leonard walked through the emergency room doors with the girl in his arms. The antiseptic smell and the constant hum of voices and medical equipment made him even more nervous. A nurse rushed toward him as soon as she saw him with the child. "What happened?" she asked, already signaling for other staff. Leonard tried to explain the situation, his words tumbling out as a medical team approached with a gurney. When they tried to take the girl from his arms, she reacted for the first time, clinging to him with surprising strength. Her small fingers gripped the expensive fabric of his suit jacket, and her eyes, once empty, now showed pure terror. "It's okay," he heard himself say, his voice softer than it had been in years. "They're going to help you. I'm not going anywhere." The words came naturally, surprising even him. The girl relaxed slightly, allowing herself to be placed on the gurney. Leonard followed as they took her to an exam room, answering an endless stream of questions for which he had no answers. It was during this process that he learned her name, Lucy. A social worker had been called, and after a quick system check they found a partial record. Lucy Smith, age 6, no fixed address listed. What shocked Leonard most was the absence of any missing child reports matching her description. The next few hours were a blur of tests, conversations with doctors and police. Leonard stayed at the hospital, unable to leave the child alone. Sitting in the waiting room, his phone buzzed incessantly with calls and messages from the office, all ignored for the first time in his professional life. The test results started coming in, each more disturbing than the last. Signs of chronic malnutrition, bruises in various stages of healing, indicating long-term abuse. The attending physician, Dr. Martinez, called Leonard for a private conversation. "Mr. Carter," he began gravely, "the situation is more serious than we thought. Beyond the obvious signs of physical abuse we found." He paused, searching for the right words. "We found evidence of severe neglect. This child has endured trauma that will take time to heal." Leonard's stomach turned. How could anyone do this to a child? Images of his own daughter at that age kept flashing in his mind, making his chest tighten even more. "And now?" he asked hoarsely. "What happens to her?" "For now, she'll remain hospitalized for treatment. The social worker is handling the case, trying to locate family or legal guardians, but given the circumstances in which she was found." The doctor didn't need to finish. It was obvious whoever was responsible for Lucy had no interest in her well-being. Leonard felt a growing anger, an emotion he hadn't experienced in a long time. When he returned to Lucy's room, he found her awake, sitting on the hospital bed, still with that distant look. But something had subtly changed. When he entered, her eyes moved toward him, and for a brief moment there was a flicker of recognition. "Hi, Lucy," he said gently, approaching the bed. "Are you feeling better?" She didn't answer, but her eyes stayed fixed on him. A nurse entered with a tray of food, and for the first time, Leonard saw a clearer reaction from the girl. Her eyes widened at the sight of the food, and her small hands clenched the sheets. "Are you hungry?" he asked, helping her sit up. Lucy gave a small nod, the first sign of communication since he'd found her. As he watched her eat slowly, almost afraid the food would disappear, Leonard felt something strange in his chest. A feeling he hadn't experienced in years, not since Lily was little and he still allowed himself to be a present father. His phone buzzed again, this time a message from his ex-wife. "Leonard, where are you? The board is panicking. You've never missed a meeting." He looked at the message and, for the first time in years, didn't feel compelled to respond immediately. Instead, he slipped the phone back into his pocket and kept watching Lucy, who was now eating with a little more confidence. Afternoon turned to evening, and Leonard remained at the hospital. Social workers came and went, police asked questions, doctors ran more tests, but he couldn't bring himself to leave. There was something about that child, about that situation, that held him there, as if a force greater than his own will kept him close. During one of those long hours of waiting, he began noticing small details about Lucy. The way she gripped the blanket tightly whenever someone entered the room, how her eyes always darted to the door as if expecting something bad to happen at any moment. Each of these gestures made his chest tighten a little more. It was late at night when the lead social worker on the case, Sandra, asked to speak with him privately. In the hospital hallway under fluorescent lights, she looked especially serious. "Mr. Carter, we need to discuss next steps. We haven't found any immediate family for Lucy, and given the circumstances in which she was found—" "What will happen to her?" Leonard interrupted, his voice betraying a concern he didn't fully understand himself. "For now, once she's discharged, she'll be placed in temporary foster care while we investigate her family situation further." The Siam. Words temporary foster care triggered a visceral reaction in Leonard. The thought of Lucy, already so fragile, being taken to a strange place full of strangers made his stomach churn. "Is there no other option?" he heard himself ask, surprised by his own words. Sandra studied him curiously. "Well, there are registered foster families for temporary placement, but the process—" "Could I—" Leonard started, then abruptly stopped. What was he about to suggest? His life was entirely work-focused. He barely maintained contact with his own daughter. How could he even consider? But when he looked through the window into Lucy's room and saw her sleeping, her small body curled under the hospital sheets, something inside him shifted, something he thought he'd lost long ago. The next morning, Leonard woke with an aching, back from sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair. His eyes immediately sought Lucy, who was still fast asleep. During the night, she'd had nightmares, screaming and thrashing, only calming when he held her small hand in his. His phone showed dozens of missed calls and unread messages. The most recent was from his assistant, Angela, informing him she'd rescheduled all of yesterday's meetings and asking if she should do the same for today. For the first time in his career, Leonard replied yes, without guilt. A nurse entered quietly with a breakfast tray. She smiled when she saw Leonard awake. "You stayed all night," she remarked softly. "You know, this is the first time I've seen her sleep so peacefully since she arrived." The nurse's words stirred something strange in Leonard. He studied Lucy's sleeping face, the marks of suffering still visible on her delicate skin, and felt something break inside him. How could anyone hurt a child like this? Dr. Martinez arrived for morning rounds, bringing Sandra with him. The two spoke quietly with Leonard in the hallway, while a nurse tended to Lucy. "Physically, she's recovering well," the doctor explained. "But the psychological trauma—" He paused meaningfully. "She'll need extensive support and specialized care." Sandra cleared her throat gently. "Mr. Carter, about our conversation yesterday, were you about to suggest something?" Leonard took a deep breath. During his sleepless night, he'd thought a lot about what he'd been about to say before stopping himself. It was crazy, of course. Him who could barely manage his own family life, considering. "I'd like to apply to be her temporary foster family," he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "Temporarily, of course," he added quickly, seeing the surprise on their faces. Sandra studied him for a moment. "Mr. Carter, the foster process is quite rigorous. We'd need to conduct a full evaluation, home visits, background checks." "Do whatever's necessary," he interrupted. "I have a large home, more than enough financial resources, and—" He hesitated. "I can't explain it, but I feel I need to do this." The doctor and social worker exchanged glances. Then a sharp cry came from Lucy's room. Leonard rushed back to find her sitting up in bed, eyes wide with panic. Without thinking, he approached and gently hugged her. "It's okay," he murmured, feeling her small body tremble against his. "You're safe now." Sandra watched from the doorway, her expression softening. "I'll start the process," she finally said, "but I need to be clear. This is temporary until we find a permanent solution for her case." The next few hours were a whirlwind of paperwork and procedures. Leonard signed documents while on the phone with his lawyer, trying to expedite the process. Between tasks, he kept his eyes on Lucy, who now ate quietly, watching everything with that gaze mixing fear and curiosity. During one of these calls, his ex-wife Margaret finally reached him. "Leonard, what's going on? Angela told me you've been at a hospital since yesterday. Is something wrong?" He hesitated, watching Lucy through the hallway window. How could he explain something he didn't fully understand himself? "Margaret, I need to tell you something. Something happened." The conversation that followed was long and difficult. Margaret oscillated between disbelief and concern. "You? Fostering a child? Leonard, you barely see our daughter. How do you expect to care for a traumatized girl?" The words stung, especially because they were true. "I know it sounds crazy," he admitted, "but you didn't see how I found her, Margaret. I can't just—" "Dad?" A new voice interrupted the call. It was Lily. "Is it true what Mom's saying about a girl?" Leonard's chest tightened. "Lily, yes, it's true. He paused, searching for the right words. "I'd like you to come meet her." A long silence followed on the other end. "You've never asked me to visit you before," Lily finally said, her voice thick with emotion. The truth of those words hit Leonard like a punch to the gut. How many times had he ignored his daughter's attempts to connect? How many birthdays, school events, and important moments had he missed, always using work as an excuse? "I know," he replied, his voice strained. "And I'm sorry for that. But now I'm asking." When he hung up, Leonard returned to Lucy's room. She was drawing, something the child therapist had suggested as a form of expression. On the paper, dark, chaotic lines intertwined, depicting the inner turmoil her young mind was processing. "Can I see?" he asked softly, sitting beside her. Lucy pushed the drawing toward him. Amid the scribbles, he could make out a small figure, alone, surrounded by shadows. But in the corner of the page, something different, a larger figure near the small one as if protecting it. "That's you," she whispered, the first words she'd spoken since he found her. Leonard felt tears forming in his eyes, something that hadn't happened in years. In that moment, looking at the simple drawing of a traumatized child, he understood his life would never be the same. And surprisingly, the idea didn't scare him as much as it should have. The days that followed were an emotional roller coaster of adjustments. Leonard's mansion, once a monument to solitude, began transforming. The guest room nearest to his was quickly adapted for Lucy, with the help of a decorator who worked against the clock to create a warm, safe space. Margaret and Lily came to visit the day Lucy was discharged from the hospital. Leonard watched nervously as his daughter approached the little girl, who still remained mostly silent. To his surprise, Lily displayed a sensitivity he hadn't known she possessed. "Hi, Lucy," Lily said, sitting on the floor beside her. "Want to see something cool?" She pulled a small storybook from her bag, the same one Leonard used to read to her when she was little. His eyes welled up as he recognized it. Lucy, who usually shrank when people approached, seemed intrigued. Her big eyes fixed on the colorful illustrations Lily showed. For the first time since he'd found her, Leonard saw a small smile form on her lips. Margaret observed the scene with a complex expression. "You're really doing this," she said. Not a question, but a statement. "Yes," he replied, not taking his eyes off the two girls. "I need to do this, Margaret." "You'll need help," she declared, surprising him. "You can't just throw money at the problem this time, Leonard. This girl needs more than that." Margaret's words, though harsh, were true. In the following days, Leonard found himself immersed in a completely new world. Consultations with child psychologists, regular visits from the social worker, routine adjustments. His office at the company remained largely untouched, with Angela handling emergencies and rescheduling commitments. It was during one of these social worker visits that the first clue about Lucy's past emerged. Sandra was reviewing documents when her expression changed. "Mr. Carter," she began hesitantly, "we found something interesting in the records. It seems Lucy has a connection to your residence." Leonard frowned, confused. "How so?" "Her mother. She worked there as a housekeeper a few years back. Her name is Valerie Smith." The name struck Leonard like lightning. Valerie, of course. She had worked in his home for nearly 2 years, always quiet, efficient. She'd left suddenly, without explanation, shortly after his divorce. "But how?" he stammered, his mind struggling to process the information. "From what we've gathered, Valerie lost custody of Lucy about 3 years ago due to neglect allegations. She was in an abusive relationship at the time." Leonard sank heavily into his chair. Memories surfaced. Valerie always seeming nervous, bruises she tried to hide with makeup, phone calls that left her visibly shaken. "Why didn't she ever say anything?" he murmured, more to himself than to Sandra. "Many domestic violence victims isolate themselves, Mr. Carter. They feel ashamed, afraid." And given her position as an employee, a noise at the door interrupted them. Lucy stood there, her small body tense as a stretched wire. Her usually empty eyes now shone with something like recognition. "Did you know my mom?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried immense weight. Leonard's heart broke. How could he explain the complexity of this situation to a 6-year-old? How could he say yes, he'd known her mother, but had been too wrapped up in his own life to notice the drama unfolding under his own roof? "Yes, Lucy," he finally answered softly. "Your mum worked here." The girl stepped closer, her eyes never leaving Leonard's face. "She talked about you," she said, surprising both Leonard and Sandra. "Said this place was safe." Lucy's words fell like stones in the silent room. Leonard felt a wave of guilt crash over him. His home, which Valerie had considered safe, had just been another place where she'd felt invisible, where her suffering had gone unnoticed. Sandra cleared her throat gently. "Mr. Carter, given this new information, will need to investigate further. There may be implications." But Leonard barely heard her. His thoughts were with Valerie. How alone and desperate she must have felt. How he, absorbed in his own post-divorce pain, had been blind to others' suffering. Lucy stepped closer, right beside his chair. With heartbreaking hesitation, she reached out and touched his arm. "Are you going to send me away?" she asked, fear evident in her voice. "No," he replied firmly, surprising even himself with the conviction in his voice. "You're safe here now, I promise." Sandra observed the interaction with professional interest, making notes in her file. But Leonard didn't care about procedures in that moment. His focus was on one thing: how he'd failed not just his own family, but those who depended on him in other ways. That night, after Lucy finally fell asleep, Leonard spent hours in his study poring over old files. He found Valerie's employment records, old photos from when she'd worked there, small details that had seemed insignificant at the time, but now screamed at his conscience. In one photo, taken during a company Christmas party, Valerie stood in the background, nearly hidden, watching the happy families with a look he now recognized, the same empty stare he'd seen in Lucy's eyes on that bridge. Weeks turned into months, and life at the Carter mansion found a new rhythm. Leonard had drastically reduced his office hours, delegating more responsibilities to his trusted team. For the first time in years, his priorities had completely shifted. Lucy began opening up slowly, like a flower afraid of the sun after a long winter. Therapy sessions 3 times a week helped, but it was the small everyday moments that made the real difference. Shared breakfasts, bedtime stories, garden walks, simple routines Leonard had never imagined would be part of his life. Again, Lily started visiting more frequently, first with the excuse of helping with Lucy, then simply because she wanted to be there. Leonard watched with a tight chest as his teenage daughter displayed a maturity and compassion he himself had taken so long to develop. On a particularly difficult afternoon after an intense therapy session, Lucy had a breakdown. Leonard found her curled in a corner of her room, trembling and crying softly. When he tried to approach, she screamed, "No, you'll leave too! Everyone leaves!" The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He sat on the floor, keeping a safe distance, and waited. Lily, who was home that day, appeared in the doorway, drawn by the screams. "What happened?" she asked gently. "At therapy today," Leonard explained quietly. "She started talking about her mother, about the day she was left on the bridge." Lily approached slowly and sat near Lucy, not too close, just enough for the girl to sense her presence. "You know, Lucy," she began, "I used to be really scared when my parents got divorced. I thought it was my fault, that if I'd been different." Leonard's heart broke hearing his daughter's words. How often had she felt that way while he was too busy building his empire? "But you know what?" Lily continued softly. "Sometimes people do leave, yes, but other people come, and some come back when they realize their mistakes." Her eyes met her father's then, and Leonard saw in them all the forgiveness he didn't deserve. Lucy looked at him too, her sobs gradually subsiding. "Do you promise?" she asked in a small voice. "Promise you won't leave?" "I promise," Leonard replied, and for the first time in his life, he felt the true weight of a promise. "I'm here to stay." That night, after Lucy finally fell asleep, Leonard and Lily talked on the patio. The night air was crisp, and the city lights glimmered in the distance. "How did you get so wise?" he asked, looking at his daughter with new eyes. Lily shrugged, a small smile on her lips. "Maybe I learned a few things while you weren't looking." Guilt washed over him again, but with it came renewed determination. "I'm sorry for that," he said, "for not being present, for letting work consume everything." "I know, Dad," she replied, surprising him with a hug. "But you're changing. I see it every day." The moment was interrupted by a cry from Lucy's room. The nightmares were still frequent, though less intense than at first. Leonard stood immediately, but Lily stopped him. "Let me go," she said. "Sometimes it's easier when it's someone who understands." He watched his daughter walk down the hall, entering Lucy's room with quiet confidence. Soon, Lily's soft voice singing an old lullaby, the same one he used to sing to her, filled the air. Sandra, the social worker, had come earlier that day with new information about Valerie. Apparently, she was living in a small town, still battling her own demons. Leonard couldn't stop thinking about how everything was connected. His own failure as a father, Valerie's silent suffering, Lucy's trauma. In his study, the folder with Valerie's documents still lay open on the desk. Among them was a recent photo Sandra had obtained. Valerie looked older, more tired, but her eyes held the same look Leonard saw in the mirror every day before finding Lucy. The look of someone who had lost something precious and didn't know how to get it back. The sound of soft laughter from Lucy's room brought him back to the present. Lily must have calmed her, as she always did. Leonard wondered, not for the first time, how his life had changed so much in so little time. The mansion, once so silent and cold, was now full of life. The hallways that once echoed only with his solitary footsteps now resonated with children's voices, teenage laughter, and sometimes tears, because healing, he was learning, wasn't always quiet or pretty, but it was real. It was true. And for the first time in a long time, Leonard felt he was on the right path. Even if that path was difficult, even if each day brought new challenges, he was no longer alone on this journey. He had Lily, he had Lucy, and slowly he was rediscovering himself. Fall arrived, bringing a new set of challenges. Lucy would start school for the first time since coming to the Carter home. The decision hadn't been easy. The psychologists hesitated, worried about how forced socialization might impact her recovery. But Lucy herself had shown interest after hearing Lily talk about her classes. The morning of the first school day dawned grey and chilly. Leonard woke earlier than usual, his mind full of worries. He found Lucy already awake, sitting on the edge of her bed in her new school uniform, her small hands nervously gripping her backpack strap. "Are you scared?" he asked gently, sitting beside her. Lucy nodded, her eyes fixed on the floor. "What if they don't like me?" "Impossible not to like you," a voice answered from the doorway. It was Lily, who had insisted on being there for this important day, even if it meant missing her own classes. Breakfast was a quiet, tense meal. Leonard watched Lucy poke at her food without really eating, while Lily tried to distract her with funny stories from her own school days. Margaret surprised them by showing up too. "I thought you might need extra support today," she explained, exchanging a meaningful look with Leonard. The moment of departure came too quickly. In the car, Lucy sat in the back between Lily and Margaret, while Leonard drove, his hands gripping the wheel tighter than necessary. When they arrived at the school, a teacher specially assigned to welcome Lucy was already waiting. "Hello, Lucy," Teacher Anna smiled warmly. "Ready to see your new classroom?" Lucy hesitated, clutching Leonard's hand. For a moment, he wanted to call it all off, to take her back home where she'd be safe. But he knew he couldn't. Part of loving someone was knowing when to let go, even if just a little. "Hey, it's going to be okay," he whispered, crouching to her level. "I'll be right here to pick you up when school's over." The day at the office was one of the longest Leonard had ever experienced. He checked his phone obsessively, waiting for calls from the school. Angela, his assistant, had to remind him several times about meetings and appointments. "She's fine," Margaret called in the afternoon to reassure him. "I stopped by the school during lunch. Teacher Anna said she's adjusting well." When it was finally time to pick her up, Leonard found a different Lucy from the one he'd left that morning. Her eyes shone as she told him about her new friend, Clara, who had shared her snack. "And Teacher Anna said I draw really well," she exclaimed, proudly showing a colorful drawing she'd made. That evening at dinner, the house was full. Margaret had stayed to hear more about the first school day, and Lily insisted on knowing every detail of Lucy's experience. It was a scene Leonard had never imagined possible just months earlier. His ex-wife, his teenage daughter, and little Lucy, all gathered around his table, talking and laughing. Later, after Lucy was asleep, exhausted but happy, Margaret stayed to talk. "You're different," she observed as they shared a glass of wine on the patio. "How so?" "More present, more human." She paused, choosing her words. "You know, when you said you wanted to foster a traumatized child, I thought it would be just another of your projects, something to distract you after the divorce, but I was wrong." Leonard reflected on her words. "I thought I knew everything too," he admitted. "That success was something measured in numbers, in closed deals. But Lucy, she's taught me more about success in these few months than I learned in my entire corporate career. And about love," Margaret added softly. "Yes," he agreed, feeling the weight of that truth. "Mostly about love." A noise from Lucy's room caught his attention. Not a nightmare cry this time, but the soft sound of giggles. Lily must have gone to check on her before bed, as she often did now. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing?" Leonard asked, his voice betraying an insecurity he rarely showed. "Sometimes I'm afraid I'm not enough for her." Margaret smiled, a gentle smile he hadn't seen in years. "The fact that you worry about that shows you're on the right path. None of us are perfect, Leonard. Not as parents, not as people. What matters is that we keep trying, keep growing." Margaret's words echoed in his mind long after she left. Sitting in his study, Leonard found himself looking at a recent photo of Lucy and Lily in the garden, both smiling at the camera, flowers in their hair. The photo sat beside an older frame, a toothless little Lily, smiling in his arms. How much time had he lost chasing the wrong things? How many precious moments had he missed while pursuing success and recognition? But now, looking at these photographs, Leonard understood it was never too late to start over. Never too late to learn how to truly love. A cold winter morning brought news that would change everything again. Sandra arrived at the mansion with a grave expression. Leonard knew immediately something was wrong. "We found Valerie," she said, once they were settled in his study. Her untouched coffee cup sat between them. "She's in a hospital upstate. She's not well, Mr. Carter." Leonard's stomach sank. "What happened?" "She tried to..." Sandra hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "She had a breakdown. She's under intensive psychiatric care. During one of her sessions, she kept talking about Lucy and about you." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unspoken implications. Leonard stood and walked to a window, watching Lucy play in the garden with Clara, her school friend who'd come to spend the afternoon. The two girls ran and laughed, oblivious to the drama unfolding inside. Did she say why she left Lucy on the bridge that day? The question that had haunted him for months finally came out. Sandra checked her notes. According to medical reports, she believed you were the only person who could truly help Lucy. She'd observed you, knew your routines, your usual routes. The day you found Lucy, it wasn't a coincidence. The revelation struck Leonard like lightning. All the pieces began falling into place. The specific location where he'd found Lucy, the pink dress so similar to Lily's, the exact timing of it all. She planned it, he murmured, more to himself than to Sandra. In a way, yes. In her troubled mind, she believed she was doing the right thing. She knew you had resources, that you could give Lucy a life she never could. Leonard sat back down, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. And now? What happens? Valerie has expressed a desire to see Lucy, Sandra said gently. But that will only happen if you and the medical team deem it appropriate. The final decision is yours as her temporary legal guardian. The word temporary echoed in his mind. Since when had he started thinking of his situation with Lucy as something permanent? How do I explain this to her? He asked, his voice strained with anguish. How do I tell a child her mother abandoned her on purpose, thinking it was best for her? With great care and love, a voice answered from the doorway. It was Margaret. She'd come to pick up some documents and overheard part of the conversation. And you don't have to do it alone. That night, after Lucy was asleep, Leonard gathered a small family council in his study. Margaret, Lily, and of course, Dr. Teresa, Lucy's psychologist. Together, they discussed the best way to handle the situation. She's shown remarkable progress these past weeks, Dr. Teresa noted. But news of this magnitude could bring up traumas we're still working through. Lily, who'd been quiet until then, finally spoke. She has a right to know the truth, to understand she wasn't abandoned because she was a bad kid, but because her mom was sick and desperate. Leonard looked at his daughter with admiration. When had she become so wise? Lily's right, Margaret agreed, but we need to do this the right way, at the right time. The discussion continued late into the night. When everyone finally left, Leonard went upstairs to check on Lucy. She slept peacefully, hugging the stuffed bear Lily had given her. Her face, once tense even in sleep, now showed a peace that broke his heart. How could he tell her that her mother, the same one who'd left her tied to a bridge, had calculated every detail of that abandonment? How could he explain that what seemed like a terrible act had been, in Valerie's troubled mind, a desperate act of love? Leonard sat on the edge of the bed, gently brushing a strand of hair from Lucy's face. She stirred slightly, murmuring something in her sleep. "Dad?" she called, her eyes opening briefly. The word, said so naturally, made his heart stop for a moment. It was the first time she'd called him that. "I'm here," he replied softly, holding her small hand. "I'll always be here." Lucy smiled in her sleep and drifted off again, but Leonard remained watching over her, thinking about life's strange turns. How could he have imagined months ago that his heartbreak over the divorce and estrangement from Lily would find healing in his love for this little girl? And now, with the truth about Valerie coming to light, he knew they'd face more turbulence. But this time would be different. This time, they weren't alone. They had each other. They had love, and sometimes he was learning. That was all that really mattered. The news about Valerie needed to be shared with Lucy carefully. Dr. Teresa suggested doing it in stages, starting with conversations about memories and feelings regarding her mother. It was during one of these sessions that Lucy truly opened up for the first time. "She used to sing to me," Lucy said, surprising everyone in the room. It was a joint session with Leonard present. When the bad man wasn't home, she'd sing softly and hold me tight. Leonard's chest tightened. It was the first time Lucy had spontaneously mentioned her life before the bridge. "How do you feel when you think about those memories?" Dr. Teresa asked gently. Lucy was silent for a long moment, her fingers playing with the hem of her dress. Sad and angry too. Why did she leave me? The question hung in the air, heavy as lead. Leonard fought the urge to hug her immediately, following the therapist's guidance to let Lucy express her feelings freely. Sometimes, Dr. Teresa began, grown-ups make wrong choices even when they're trying to do what's right. Like when you hide something you broke because you're afraid of getting in trouble, even though you know you should tell the truth. Lucy nodded slowly, processing the analogy. But she hurt me. Yes, she did, Leonard finally spoke, his voice gentle. And nothing can change that. But here's the thing. Sometimes people hurt others because they're hurting too. That doesn't make it okay, but it helps us understand. Lucy's small fingers twisted the edge of her blanket, her brow furrowed in concentration. Like when I yelled at Lily last week because I was scared about my spelling test? Leonard exhaled softly, marveling at her perception. Exactly like that. Grown-ups don't always know how to handle their big feelings either. Dr. Teresa leaned forward, slightly. Lucy, your mom was very sick in her heart and mind when she left you. She thought wrongly that Leonard could help you better than she could, but she never stopped loving you. The room grew quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. Outside, a lawnmower droned in the distance, the sound drifting through the partially open window. Lucy stared at the family photo on the therapist's desk, the one of Leonard, Lily, and her at the zoo last month. Will I have to leave? The question came out barely audible, her knees drawn up to her chest. Leonard's throat tightened. He moved to kneel beside her chair, his hands trembling as he reached for hers. Never. Not unless you want to. This is your home now for as long as you'll have us. A tear splashed onto their joined hands. Lucy's whisper carried the weight of every foster home, every broken promise she'd endured. Promise for real? Cross my heart. He traced an X over his chest, the gesture Lily had taught her during movie nights. We're working on something called adoption. That means, I know what it means. Lucy's sudden smile lit up her entire face. Jasmine at school has 2 dads who adopted her. They got a judge and everything. Dr. Teresa's pen scratched across her notepad. How do you feel about that idea, Lucy? The girl launched herself at Leonard, her small arms squeezing, his neck with surprising strength. I want my last name to be Carter, and I want Lily to teach me to ride bikes without training. Wheels and... She pulled back abruptly, her smile fading. Will my mom get in trouble? Leonard looked to Dr. Teresa, who gave a subtle nod. Your mom's getting special help now, sweetheart. The important thing is you're safe and loved. And the office door burst open. Lily stood panting in the doorway, her college backpack sliding off one shoulder. Sorry I'm late. Professor kept us... She froze, taking in the tear-streaked faces. Whoa, did I miss the big talk? Lucy scrambled down and ran to her, whispering urgently. Lily's eyes widened, then softened. She crouched to Lucy's level, her voice thick. No way they're letting you go, Squirt. You're stuck with us forever. She pulled a crumpled paper from her pocket. Look what I found cleaning my dorm. My first grade report card. Thought you'd like to see what kind of grades you're aiming for, future Carter. As Lucy studied the smudged A's and B's, Leonard's phone buzzed. Sandra's text glowed on the screen. Court-approved termination of parental rights. Home study scheduled for Thursday. One step closer. The late afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, painting stripes of gold across the trio. Somewhere, in the building, a clock chimed 5 times. Leonard watched Lily demonstrate proper backpack-wearing techniques to an enthralled Lucy, their laughter weaving through the sterile office air. Dr. Teresa touched his arm. You should know. Valerie's asking for supervised visitation once the adoption finalizes. The words should have sent him reeling. Instead, Leonard found himself nodding. If Lucy wants it, and only when the doctors say she's ready. Outside, a car honked. Lily groaned. That's my Uber. Study group at 6. She kissed Lucy's forehead. Save me some mac and cheese, okay? When the door closed, Lucy climbed back onto Leonard's lap, her fingers playing with his tie. Dad? The title still sent warmth flooding through him. Can we get a puppy? After the judge says I'm yours for real. Dr. Teresa's muffled cough sounded suspiciously like laughter. Leonard pressed his lips to Lucy's curls, breathing in the strawberry shampoo scent. "We'll discuss it. Right after we discuss why. Your math homework was in the freezer this morning." The therapist's phone chose that moment to ring. She glanced at the ID. "It's the hospital about Valerie's transfer. I need to go." Leonard stood, lifting Lucy with him. "We've got an important mission anyway." He tweaked Lucy's toes. "Someone promised to help me pick out non-boring vegetables." As they walked through the parking lot, Lucy swung between their hands, her pink sneakers skipping over cracks. "Dad, when I'm officially adopted, can we take flowers to my mom? The yellow ones she liked?" Leonard's steps faltered. The grocery list fluttered from his grasp. In that moment, beneath the sprawling California sunset, he understood the extraordinary gift this wounded, wise child had given them all: the courage to love without limits, to make room in their hearts for every broken piece of their patchwork family. The automatic doors slid open. Lucy dashed ahead toward the produce section, her laughter ringing through the fluorescent-lit store. Leonard watched her go, his chest aching with a joy he'd never dared imagine. Somewhere beyond these walls, Valerie was fighting her own battles. Lily was racing toward adulthood, and he, the man who'd once measured his worth in profit margins and accolades, stood holding a crumpled grocery list, more certain of his purpose than ever before. Life wouldn't be perfect. There would be court dates and therapist visits, teenage rebellions and painful conversations. But as Lucy came running back with 2 ears of corn, "Look, they're hugging just like us," Leonard knew one truth with absolute clarity: whatever came next, they would face it together.